very much indeed for turning up. There are 66 of you on the call. The sun is shining outside. It's one of the best days of the year, and you have decided during this lockdown to spend it with me. So I will not delay you any longer than I need to. I can see questions coming up. Please fire up questions if you like. They're coming up on another screen. So if I'm looking away from you, I'm not gazing mindlessly into the distance. I have them over here. We're going to answer the questions at the end. This is going to run for 1 hour. The first 45 minutes is me monologuing. So there isn't going to be that much engagement, but monologuing. In the last 15 minutes, we'll go through the questions and answer section. We're going to go through, this is a 5-step, 5-webinar series. And today is about resilient businesses and being a resilient business in the digital economy. My background is that I've owned a company for 21 years, which shows some level of resilience or insanity, whichever way you want to look at it. And we have, about 10 years ago, we were very badly disrupted. We were a technology business, and yet another technology disrupted our technology. And at that point, we realized we're not actually built for resilience. And from over the last 10 years, we have been building that resilience, and we have built in the agility, and we now teach it. So I'm a visiting professor at Ulster University. I lecture at the University of Cambridge. I've written several books, white papers, YouTube channels, all of that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a very broad overview. And in that broad overview, you will see that we go into the depths and touch on the stuff that would happen in next week and in the next 4 weeks. So let's get going. There's no going back. There's no going back. In a British YouGov survey, 9% of people wanted things to go back to the way they were before COVID-19. 9%. This was reported on Sky. And the reason that they're saying this is because they felt such a difference in connection with other humans, in society, in what they purchase, in what they dispose of, what they use. And everybody is now saying, we don't want to go back to the same way that we worked, the same way that we purchased, the same way that we earned, the same way that we commuted, the same way that we collaborated. All of these things have changed. So we have to be ready for that change. And in fact, we have to inspire the change. So there is a wave of change that's happening, and we'll be talking about waves throughout this. There's a wave of change that's happening. Technology has just been forced upon everyone. We're all sitting in a webinar. 90 of us are now online, witnessing a webinar on the sunniest day of the year. This has now become standard practice within the business. It's now an acceptable way to attend a meeting. And this is only the surface. So how do I create strategies that leverage this, that push this change, and get technologies that can pull this change? You have to first acknowledge that you want change. The change has to be something that you desire. So over the next 5 weeks, today we're going to be looking at change blocks, building a resilient digital business. Next week, we are going to take a much deeper look at strategy, at mindset of leaders, managers, and decision makers. One of the biggest mistakes that businesses do consistently and are feeling the pain of having done so now is that they mistake technology as transformation. Technology is a tool. Transformation is something that happens to people. You transform, which enables you to transform and change your business. The more agility you have in your mindset, the more agility that's built into the strategy, the more agility you can build into a business. And that agility is the antidote to chaotic situations that we have right now. So on May 5th, we're then going to look at the most powerful tool in the arsenal right now that no one's using, artificial intelligence. Why? Because the technologists think it's too difficult? Nope. because the business hasn't told them what they want the technology to do. We don't yet know the business capabilities of the technology to try and give guidance and to clear the path for automation and for radical change in the organization. Businesses aren't necessarily built, and it actually comes from lazy success. The more successful we are, the more we refine our processes and build them into a shape that is more robust. We don't like deviation. Well, AI wants to change all that. Then on May 12th, we're going to take a look at innovation. And of course, the innovation and creativity and ideas are all very different. What's the difference between an idea and creativity? Are you being creative? Just a good idea? Is it innovation? Is it a culture of innovation? What way does your business stand? Because we can't implement the strategies and leverage the AI unless we have the right levels and processes for innovation. And what should we be working on? Well, what does the data say? I love it when Fauci, the guy who's working with Trump, the one who is mentally on a power with science, and when everybody says to him, the interviewer says to him, well, 73% of doctors feel this new drug is doing okay. He goes, I don't care how they feel. What does the data say? It's the data that will drive my decision, not how you feel. So how many of our strategies are built around how we feel? How many of them are built around data? Data. Tomato. Okay, so what's a resilient business? I did the Cardinal Sun and I went to McKinsey to find out what they had to say. They said there are 4 key elements. And number 1 is that you capitalize on technology-enabled operations. We get more from our assets and improve our planning. My question to you, what improved planning techniques have you used that have leveraged data, emerging technologies, enabling you to create agility in your business and new competitive advantage? And if the answer is plenty, brilliant. I applaud you. The answer is, we're small. That's not an excuse. Every business has the ability to do this. Number 2, explore agile ways of working. COVID-19 forced this issue into our faces. And some businesses are now realizing, we haven't integrated our data silos. We haven't actually built a business that was good for agile working. So there's a scramble, the pressure's on to consolidate that. Maintain customer loyalty, particularly high growth areas after the recession, which makes sense. So McKinsey are saying the old way would have been to / cut all costs. What they were saying is you actually build cash, divest of assets where necessary to ensure that the cash is there. That's all very good. The gate's open, the horse is bolted. I'm not suggesting that you've done anything wrong if you haven't done this, but the best businesses had, which is 90% of the top performing businesses in the S&P 500 have not done this because it was so unexpected. And so what they're saying is you divest in assets and then you invest through the downturn. Divest in assets, get your cash, and then look at the new through the downturn. Because here's the kicker. Those that gain even a small competitive advantage during a downturn market make it incredibly difficult for competitors to catch up once the upswing comes. There's a real good reason to strike now with the making the change, making the difference, and growing your business in this period. So I've got a little test for you. Where am I now? Do I need to digitally transform? Do we need to understand what this even means for starters? Let me just take a look at what it means, and then I've got a little quiz for you. So the words digital transformation, for me, it is the deliberate strategic repositioning of your business in the digital economy. Does not mean that you just buy all the latest tech. That does not give you strategic competitive advantage. In particular, most businesses can now get access to the same technology at practically zero cost. There's a ubiquity of technology. Implementing it doesn't give you automatic competitive advantage. You have to strategically reposition your business, leveraging the technology. And it's that thought applied to the tech that will help make that difference. To put it another way, the word digital is a synonym for the pace of change that's occurred in today's world driven by the rapid adoption of technology. I have seen the curtains and the ceiling of my mother's house while she video conferences me. The lady's in her late 70s, and I still get the top of her head. Sometimes I get the whole head. But my mum's video conferencing. She's in Zoom chat forums. She's adopted the technology because the situation has forced it. There is no argument anymore about people not being able to adopt or accept the technology. At practically every level of society, the digital adoption has happened. The transformation is, in this context, is how your organization is built to change, innovate, and reinvent itself, rather than just simply enhance and support your traditional methods. So if you're not building the business to reinvent based on my mum and her inability to differentiate from the ceiling if you're not building a business for everyone that can change with this evolving technology, then we're falling behind. And AI, IoT, blockchain, those technologies, those emerging technologies are driving great inspiration in this area. Okay, so back to this little quiz that I have for you. I want you to go through this with me and try to plot where you think your business is. Okay, the first stage is, it comes in 4 stages. And stage 1 means you really need to transform quickly. Stage 2, it's not as urgent, but it's coming. Stage 3, you're probably going through it. And stage 4, I applaud you, I salute you. Now, when I'm talking about your business, I'm not talking about how a small section of it, how a little piece of your business is performing away in the distance at the fringes. I'm talking about the center of mass. And somebody's saying here that culture can be the barrier to change. We will get to that. David Rowe, we will get to that. He's absolutely right. Culture can be the barrier. It's very difficult to define. Let me go through number 1. Slow to adopt a change, avoid risks, purchase necessary, off-the-shelf proven technology. Is that you? There's no clear value proposition. Now that means when you're proposing something to the customer, they see the value. They can read the value. Make sales team responsible for more challenging trading conditions. You seek profit through cost reductions. If that's happening to you now, you're at a competitive disadvantage. Number 2, stable. We will adopt a change when pushed. We'll invest in proven outcomes and we will invest in new technology just to sustain the existing business model. So you have these small incremental changes. And that's fine. That's fed us all for the last 10 years. It's perfect. But we have a similar growth profile to competitors. The growth is slow but acceptable. We seek profits just by simply maintaining the status quo. In times like this, both of those 1 and 2 are troublesome areas to be in. Number 3, we seek perpetual change. We invest in innovation and experimentation. We leverage emerging technology to create unique solutions. My question is, how much are you investing in innovation? What is the risk profile that you have defined for your experimentation? When it goes wrong, you're accepting it, you're happy to go along with it. If those questions don't come quickly, it's unlikely that we are really creating that competitive advantage. So the outcome of that would be you appear differentiated in the market. We are the only ones that do X because we've done Y better than anyone else. Growth can be erratic as you experiment, but it's upward. And the growing into new and emerging markets. You look for the trend, you perceive the trend, you ride the wave as the wave grows. And then number 4 is the market dominant. We seek to upend existing markets. We collaborate with others on innovations to find new market opportunities. We invest in new solutions powered by emerging technology. So this idea of collaborating, internal collaborations across silos or external collaborations with other partners. Who owns the intellectual property? What happens if it fails? What happens if they go under? So it's the idea of removing silos. The idea of being able to get outside the organization and not get hung up on the legal and managerial and risk. It's all been predefined. It's all been understood. So then you have a radically new way of doing things. Other businesses find difficult to emulate. Your growth is exponential, which is slow at first. We all now know about exponentials, the amount of exponential graphs we've seen for COVID-19. We invest in new submarkets. Put yourself in one of those four. If you're in 1 and 2, you have to stay for the next 4 weeks after this. If you're in 3, you're doing well, probably we could help. And 4, you are the exemplar case, and I take my hat off. Okay, who needs to be involved in this game? We need to have communications people. Communications typically talk about digital transformation, and I feel that they get a lot of it kind of wrong. They talk about it from a tweeting, Facebooking, Instagramming, but actually it's all about how do you change the mindset inside your organization for change? How do you convince customers of this new reposition? How do you get people to collaborate with you? It's all about persuasion on a mindset perspective. We need the technologists to build these solutions, but the number one missing in action always for digital transformation is leadership. Transforming into what? From what? To where? Why? If you can't answer those basic questions, that's not for a technologist to answer. That's not even for a communications person to answer. That's for a leader, manager, decision-maker to answer. And are we doing incremental change or is it step change? And if it's incremental, it's not transformational. We've been doing incremental change since the dawn of commerce. That's not change. That's change, but it's not transformational. So park this idea of transformation happens every time we stick a new server into a server rack or buy a new platform. Everybody's been doing operational upgrades since forever. Transformation is different. Transformation is that we're going to enter new and emerging markets. We're going to create a new and emerging market. We're going to leverage these new and emerging opportunities. And we're going to use that agility to service what we have and to build the new. Here's what we're going to spend the rest of our time. So I'll go through these between now and 9 p.m. And I can't see the worried look on your face when I say 9 p.m. Stop talking now. We've only got another 15, 20 minutes. Okay. There's 5 key elements to digital transformation and building that resilient business. It's the mindset of the leaders and the strategies they prepare. This will not happen by accident. The digital mindset means you must default to data, which is at the end, the red block. The digital mindset means that you have to be open to experimentation. We have to define our as-is state and where we're going to. We must be able to articulate that to our people, which is our staff and in customer engagement. We must be able to build the new because with building the new comes competitive advantage. We must be able to leverage emerging technology, and it is not good enough. It is not good enough in the modern day for a leader to say, I understand finance, but I've got accountants. I understand legals, but I've got a law department. I don't really understand that tech. That's the IT guys. The number one disruptive force to any business is technology. And while AI will not replace the leader, leaders that understand AI in particular will replace those that don't. It's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of shame in the modern day for a modern leader, regardless of age, to not understand the business capabilities of emerging tech. They have to know it, because when you understand the tech, not from a spanner and programming perspective, I mean, when you understand its business capabilities, it inspires different strategies. It inspires different ways of looking at things. So here's the telltale signs. You might recognize some of these. Hopefully you do. If you haven't taken deliberate practice to change the mindset in the business and to build data-enabled predictive strategies, if you haven't done that, what happens is that we simply digitize. The technologists come in and look at the business processes and they just digitize exactly what's there. It's not their fault. What else were they to do? They're not allowed to go across silos. And here's the thing. When you start with the customer and you start to pull the pain of the customer, it goes right through every department. Me as the customer, I don't care about your departments. I just care about me. Me. So quite often the strategies have to have an impact on the entire structure of the organization. If we don't get the trust of the customer and the trust internally, we get resistance to that change. This is the communications component. If we don't create the right processes for innovation, distinguish the difference between a good idea and innovation, and if we don't give the direction for innovation, we create incoherent projects or random acts of digital. Multiple apps, multiple pages, multiple websites, multiple random acts of digital just plucked out of there. Why? Because the leader said digitize, do technology. It's a leadership problem. The strategy must define the problem, and the innovation will solve the problem. The technology is the tool that we use, but if you don't get the right tools, you get frustration. And if we don't get the right data, we get stagnation. We've transformed, we're resilient, done. We're never done. The data would tell us that. We're going to go into each one of these change blocks now, and we're going to take a look very broadly at the core components that sit behind them. Because if a business is saying it's digitally transformed and it's only really addressed the technology change block, you're feeling pain. It creates operational efficiency. And as we will see, operational efficiency is not strategic. Upgrading what you do in your existing business is something that has happened since the dawn of time. You should do it. It's important that we do it. But what's the strategy? That's not a strategy. So let's take a look at this little green guy over here. Mindset and strategy, they're very closely linked. Many businesses are blissfully unaware. They don't realize what's coming. They don't realize the need for agility. They don't realize that all their customers are actually first starting point is online. That doesn't matter how complex or less complex their business is. It doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C, if they're government, if you're a charity, if you're an election party. It's online of where the data will tell you what people want and what they're doing. How many people came to your website and failed to complete the transaction they set out to do? What was the number? How long did it take them? Why did it take so long? Does the competitor do it easier? Because when it gets easier, they tend to win. I mean, that unawareness from the data is a sign that we need to transform, because that's where the customer's starting point is. That's where the customer's head is. And even in government, where we don't necessarily have this competitiveness, it is what defines the customer, the citizen's enjoyment of working with the government. Others are overambitious, multiple unfinished projects. We see this a lot. We've got a little bit of a landing page, squeeze pages, test and experiment that no one really defined what the hypothesis was, and they're scattered all over the place. Maybe something gets picked up. But why? Because we were too busy. So we didn't dedicate the resource. The strategic, the urgent became more important than the important. And that happens a lot. My business, your business, everybody's business. So I'm not sitting here saying, perfected this one. It's tough. Power statements. We shall be the number one socially engaged, representing our customers. We will gain 10,000 page impressions. We will grab 2,000 new customers per minute, per hour, per second. Guess what that is? Does anybody know? Answers up there? Anybody want to hazard a guess? What's the answer? What's that? No one's coming through. It is, of course, waffle. Well done, Billy Goodburn. It's waffle. Power statements do not make a strategy in the digital age. And politically stagnant. It's just too difficult. So let me go to the next slide. This is a guy called Richard Rummel. Professor Richard Rummel is from UCLA. He's a globally recognized strategy expert. This is an interview with him. The eminent strategy expert Richard Rummel argues that most so-called strategic plans are actually rolling resource budgets and market share projections. These are certainly important. A rapidly growing retail chain, for example, must guide its acquisition and development of property. But they won't transform a company's performance. That, Professor Rummel suggests, happens mostly when an organization finds and exploits a change in business and technology environments and rides it with speed, skill, and determination. Finds and exploits a change in the business and technology environment and rides it with speed, skill, and determination. I have never witnessed a time in my life where there is a change in the business and technology environment. It's never been more pronounced than it is right now. So the strategies are all about addressing that. He said that what most people miss in a strategy is a strategy kernel. If the strategy does not have these three core components, Rummel says it's not actually a strategy. Diagnosis of the situation. What is the pain or the problem we're trying to solve? The strategy must say, we are here, we are going to here, and here's the 10 things I don't know the answer to. Now, that takes humility from a leader's perspective. Then you say, well, I don't know how to solve these problems, but here's my guidance, my guiding policy. And then the senior managers and operations, they get busy taking coherent action to solve those diagnosed problems. Rummel argues in the absence of that diagnosis, we take incoherent action. Now, why do I bring this strategy stuff up? Because strategy defines how you use the tools, the technology. If this bit is wrong, so too is the technology. So too is the digitization. Yes, get Skype, get email, get Zoom, get whatever it is, but that's just operations. It's not going to create competitive advantage. It's not going to create a resilient business. It's an expectation, not a differentiator. Rummel says you've got to go diagnosis. Now, here's my last point on diagnosis. A guy breaks down, his fan belt's broken. What do you do? Well, when you actually find out he didn't service his car, why? Because he didn't have the money. Why? Because he lost his job. Why? Because he didn't have the education to continue in that line of employment. So he needs education. Yes, that's the diagnosis. He doesn't need a fan belt. He needs education. Maybe a fan belt for now. That level of deep diagnosis only happens when you deliberately get into that headspace to make it happen and look at data. Data. I'm going to show you data in our red change block. If I get there, I'm running out of time. Another 15, 20 minutes. We're okay. Staff and customer engagement. That's our next change block. We need to be aware that communication is what changes people's understanding of what you do, is what drives and motivates staff and teams. It's what changes the culture. You can't ignore communication or misunderstand blogging, tweeting, Facebooking as being some level of mastermind communication. It does need to tactically happen. I'm not dismissing that. But what's our strategic play? Here's 4 very simple boxes. Next week, we're going to go into this in much more depth. Advocacy. You build your relationships one handshake at a time. I'm sorry, you can't handshake anymore. One sterilized handshake at a time. Advocacy. You build people who recommend you to others. And that's good stuff. Your digital footprint will show that your about us section is probably the most important. You bloat your products and services. I only want to know who Jim is, who's about to walk through my door, who Mary recommended to me. So the communication has to be around that person and that relationship. Authority is a different kind. You've created industry authority. Okay, you're going, oh, well, we're the industry authority. Prove it. Show me the metrics. Because an industry authority, everybody's referring to them. Everybody's pointing at them. And what usually causes people to point is innovation. You've innovated, not advertised, innovated. So an authority play is different to an advocacy play. An attention play is where there's lots of people looking for something and you buy the ads. You buy their attention at their moment of need. And prime, in most markets, mature markets, there's 2 or 3 big players. The Microsofts, the Googles, the Apples. The Pirellis, the Michelins, the whatever the tire is. The vanilla, the strawberry, the chocolate ice creams. I mean, those are the big ones and they tend to suck up more than 50% of the market share. So what happens is each of those positions in a market has a growth profile. If you want to stay in advocacy, it's slow growth, no problem. Make all of your communications about your guys. If you want to go in for advertising, that's the black line. It can grow until there becomes a point where the transactional value is higher than the value of the deal. People have bid it up. If you want to become the industry innovator, it's really difficult. You've got to actually deliberately innovate, and that's the blue line. You've got to publish. People got to reference you. And if you're prime, it's a position of defense. Most people will go to the prime, the biggest brands that they know. All of the communications differs dependent upon where you are where you plan to go. And if that's not defined, then the communications isn't strategic. It's tactical and operational. It's servicing the needs of what exactly we're doing right now. Here's number 3, culture of innovation. Most organizations, when I talk to them, are you innovative? Yep, we are. We're very innovative. Oh, what did you invent? Well, we sell kitchen knives and we made sharper knives. That's not an innovation. In fact, I'm not even sure it's a good idea. So the way to innovate is that we start off with a customer problem or pain or unmet need. And where does that come from? The diagnosis and the strategy. And if we don't get the diagnosis and the strategy, then we need to, whatever will happen is just going to be random acts of digital. So the leaders need to go back to that diagnosis part. That's why I dwelled on for so long, something that doesn't really mean digital, but it's so important to the resilience of your business. I had 4 good ideas in the shower this morning. They all got washed down the plug hole. Ideas are plentiful and valueless unless there's some method to capture them and to rate them and to understand them, a gate system to prioritize them, because usually your ambition is greater than your resource. Creativity is different to good ideas. So a child learns to draw automatically. You just give it a paintbrush and it'll start to paint. But it doesn't learn to read and write. That is a taught practice of creativity. And most economic creativity requires learned practice, skills. I couldn't take up a paintbrush and paint like a painter. I'm not that creative. Creativity shows itself in many ways. Here's my point. Businesses that rely on an ideas box for random ideas, perceive it to be creative, build tech around it, are not being strategic, they're barely being creative, and they're not fostering a culture of innovation. Start with the problem, get the ideas to address the problem, practice creativity, experiment and innovate, and then make it embedded inside the organization, and you will get a culture of innovation. There needs to be process for this, and of which there are 1,000 books. There are 1,000 ways. But in the digital age, I can make a product or service, and I've done it many times. I put it online just to see, does anybody want to buy it? I mean, even the craziest business-to-business idea. If I put in an electromagnet for a Large Hadron Collider, I put it online and see, can I get anybody to make communications with me on this? And if the answer is no, then I have no scalable proposition. So why am I making a bigger magnet? I mean, the idea that you can just keep addressing the same clients is good, but when the market disruption happens, those clients, you're at the mercy of them being robust all of the time. And that's very rare. You wouldn't be in this webinar if that was happening. So to build a culture of innovation needs agility, it needs strategy, it needs communication. All of these things need to come together. Technology. So AI is the one. The blockchain and IoT are side stories. Artificial intelligence is the biggest change that will ever happen in the technical world since the invention of the internet. I mean, anything that has a decision tree and data associated with it, you can teach an AI to do it, which just happens to be most legal processes, most financial processes, most logistics processes, most sales processes, most marketing processes. I mean, I could go through every department. But AI won't change the business unless the leaders leverage AI and build a business that can do so. It doesn't matter how good your user experience is and how many people are working away on it and in the background and all of your systems for conveyor belts. This automates decision-making like never before. We're going to go into this on week 3, I believe, 3 weeks from now. Not all businesses are built to be able to do this. So what I've zoomed in on here is that there's 2 sides to this, inside out. how operationally efficient your business is. And most businesses go through digitization and mistake it as transformational. It's not transformational. Most then have to go through this transforming state where those 5 change blocks. And only then are we ready to go AI powered. This is on the inside of our business. Platforming, getting all our tools in a row. Now, these numbers, there's a reason for these numbers. You can get your own number. I can pretty much guess where your business is because of the outside in. Outside in is how your digital footprint looks. Those businesses that are online and doing digital usually score between 0 and 20. And next week, we're going to look at the tools to allow you to see your score and to position where you are. And what happens is that you then, if you're less than somewhere between 20 and 45, you're in the middle of this digital transformation process. And you have to ask yourself, are we really data-driven, data-ready? Because data is what powers AI. Data is what will power the stories of the future. It will power the innovations of the future. Then we need to become into delivering AI services and become AI agile. That's from the outside looking in. So there is a journey for all of this. You can't just say, let's leverage AI and let's get going. And if you ask your technologists just to leverage AI, well, what jobs are they permitted to displace? Who can they move Fergal into the innovation team, the transformation team? Is he allowed to do that? Because it's equivalent to the technologist saying, I need the business leader to configure the Amazon Web Services. You know, what the heck's that got to do with me? That's your job. Yes, well, preparing our business for artificial intelligence, that's your job. So once we know what the road looks like, once we know what the permeations of the challenges are, at least we know what we're playing with. Most businesses haven't figured that bit out yet. And that's why AI is yet to deliver the killer blow. Those that do get it are steaming ahead. They're steaming ahead. And then finally, we've got data and analytics. I'm going to finish right on time, which is not traditional, but good to know. This is a true story. I just pulled this up. I'm talking to a guy in Scotland, in Edinburgh, who swears a lot. I think it was almost like you were talking to Shrek. You know what I mean? But with swearing. He was that archetypal Scottish. And he runs a bed mattress manufacturer. And the entire mid-table has closed. All of the independent retailers throughout the UK have closed. So he's sitting going, what's my business model? Because he said, the problem is, I don't think many of them will open again. A lot of them are struggling. This could be enough to knock their lights out. What can you tell me? Within 5 minutes, we're looking at the live public data around how many people are online in the United Kingdom. Well, registered on Google, there's about 59 million out of 66 million. And how many of those people are looking for beds? And what kind of beds? How many would know you as a brand or are looking for a brand? How many of them are looking for particular retailers for a particular brand? How many of them are buying direct? What kind of mattresses are they looking for? What size of mattresses are in demand? In fact, if we were to take a look and see when are things appearing to be the busiest time, and when people believe it to be the busiest time are completely different. The graph that says the week of November 21st, 2020, it's predictive. It's to do with AI, predictive models. Google is telling me that the highest amount of people are bidding for ads on the week of the 21st of November, believing that to be the extravaganza week. I can also see from the data that that's the decline week. People stop buying their mattresses and starts to decline. I can also tell you that when people, this is on the week 26th, December 26th, that by far the busiest time of the year is Christmas Day, Boxing Day, the days you're closed, the days that no one is really practicing this. Same thing goes for gyms and health spas and hotels and many in tourism. The time that the customer's looking is the week between the 26th of December and the New Year, and everybody's closed. but yet it's the busiest time digitally online. So the decision may be delayed, but the purchase may be delayed, but the decision is being made around those points in time. So he's wanting to know insights into his industry. This is a guy that's 30 years in the industry, third generation, didn't know any of this, wasn't able to just grab it. And in 5 minutes, these data sets are accessible. But it's not because he's not technically aware, it's that he doesn't have the digital mindset. He doesn't have a strategy. Even if he showed them to this, the staff will go, well, what are we going to do about this? What's the operating model? What's the business model? What's the experimentation? What can we lose? What are affordable losses? That hasn't been defined. What's the near-term problem? How do we handle channel conflict? Should come back to life. All of those decisions are inspired by looking at the data, but come from having a data, digital-driven mindset that powers the strategy, the communications, the innovations, the technology, and arrive us at this point. That leaves us to just to close off. This is about the change blocks in the resilient business. This is very high level. Next week, the mindset and strategy, we'll be looking at that quadrant of advocacy and prime. Where are we now? On May 5th, we'll be looking at that inside out, outside in graph, getting your numbers. Where are you? Then May 12th, we'll be looking at what does innovation look like? And May 19th, we will be looking at data-driven decision making. It's fast, it's rapid, I get that. We're also running with Skillnet a deep dive course, which is going to last for about 5 days, which is going to go into all of this stuff in much greater detail for you. This is yet to be confirmed. It's floating around. The exact date is yet to be confirmed, but it's going to be called No Going Back. And we're going to go to questions and answers. Spend the last 15 minutes looking at questions and answers. So where will we go? Bill Goodburn. We have a siloed approach. Good in some areas, but poor or very poor in others. The challenge is getting the stakeholders to think that way. Deep diagnosis is fundamental. But how do we get everyone to think that way? Billy, the answer to this is, first of all, they must want change. They must desire change. And if they don't, forget it. Walk away. You can't force people to think differently. Then, if they do, they decide this is something that we want, they need to go on deliberate practice, education. They need to sit in webinars, go on courses, and get themselves up to speed with what this really means. And the reason is that the antidote to siloed, we build, it's not anybody's fault, we build these departments to be specialists in different tasks, but in the modern day, the problem crisscrosses across them all. To be able to get the leader to understand their role, and their role is very dull. It's removing barriers. It's not actually coming up with innovation. That's the senior manager's role, building teams. And then in the operational role, we have to build people who can execute and experiment to match the problems, to solve those problems across silos. So this is definitely not something that can be solved without senior leaders, but if the senior leaders are reluctant, can't be done. Don't try to transform. Forget it. Digitize and be happy. But if they can, it starts with education. I hope that helped. Andrea Loeb, how often would you recommend reviewing and refreshing strategy if we were to identify and right away? That's a good question, Andrina. It's a good question. That guy, Richard Rummelt, he says, wait for it. He says your strategy is about the near-term challenges and how you're going to overcome it, and therefore cannot be more than 3 months to 6 months into the distance. Now, that's not to say your vision, your to-be state, your vision can be longer into the distance. Now, when I'm saying this to people sitting around sipping coffee, they spit their coffee out. It takes me 3 months to write a strategy. Doesn't. If we know where the defined end state is, and we define all of the challenges, and we look at the biggest, riskiest challenge, and we test it through experimentation and data, there is no reason to go beyond that. Because if that turns out to be false, so is the rest of the strategy. So there is a vision, and there is the strategic imperatives, the riskiest ones you put to the start, and that's where you use innovation to test. A strategy, 1 page, 2 pages, easily understood, clearly defined what the problems are, the outcome that we're seeking, the vision. That's what Rommel would say is needed. Could you please spend 30 seconds to introduce what this initiative is all about? You mentioned that it's a series of 5 talks. What is the main goal? To attract students, to build community, or any other? You might have it already published, so if you could educate me how to check it out. Okay, the purpose of this is really just to sort of introduce everybody as to what a digitally transformed business is actually about. Skillnet are tasked with educating the people of Ireland as to how to make the best commercial outcomes for their business, how to become the most innovative business, the most resilient business. And the purpose of these webinars is to try to help make that happen. And what's brought it into sharp focus is that most businesses have just received a shock to the system and don't necessarily know how to cope with it. Digital transformation, proper transformation, like those 5 change blocks, is what it takes. It would have been better if we'd started in good times, but here we are. So that's the purpose. If you're finding that your business, when we did that 1, 2, 3, and 4, if you're in 1 and 2, you need to move. If you're in 3, you're probably moving well, and in 4, you're flying. Okay, is there a proper assessment process to identify our status in the digital transformation? I'm going to do this only once, and it's more of the tease for next week. This is one of those ones where, you're not supposed to work with live websites, animals, and what is it? There is something that we're going to be looking at next month. It's called propulsion.ionology.com. And this is an artificial intelligence tool that allows you to assess your digital footprint. So if I were to go for Vodafone.ie, I can get their score. And the reason I wasn't going to introduce it now is because it goes in and it starts talking about cultures of innovation and actions to take and points to clarify and where you are and where you could go and where you are in the quadrant. But you need to understand all of that for it to make much more sense. So this is a part of what we will be going through briefly. So there isn't the purpose of this is to introduce you to it, not to give you the full 9 yards. Something practical to take away, but it won't solve all problems. That's the purpose of what's going on there. Hopefully that will help. That will help with what we're suggesting. Next question. How do I learn about customer searches in Google as shown? That's week 5. That is week 5. I will be showing it in week 5. My concern is if I go and log in now, here's the problem. You need to have a Google login. If you want to follow me, there's 1,000 clicks that needs to be done. It's not easy. In fact, when I'm demonstrating in week 5, I won't even be asking you to do it. It's not something that you can do easily unless you're in a smaller classroom. But I'll tell you one thing that is necessary. What comes first, data or the business question? The answer is the business question. When you get into analytics and you get into data, imagine I set down a spreadsheet in front of you. So what can you tell me? You go, it's just numbers. Yeah. What can you tell me? What do you mean? What do you want to know? And it always comes back to, what do you want to know? Which always comes back to whatever the strategic problem was. What's the strategy say? What do we need to know? So you can't jump straight to the data. You've got to have the data embedded in the decision-making in the first instance. And as Rommel says, that's not just new sales projections or rolling resource plans or anything of that nature. You've got to start off understanding the business problem through the diagnosis across the silos, where the business is, where it would like to be. And then you would use data to help solve those problems. Setting up innovations and testing them. But we will get that. Testing innovations is week 4. There's a barrier to the uptake of digital transformation and people working in silos. How can this be addressed? Well, we've already addressed that question. I think the idea is that people must want to change, and then leaders need to lead the change, and leaders need to communicate the to-be state and how we're going to get there and why it's better for me as an employee. Why is it better? Why is the new state better than the old? Transforming into what? And if you don't get this, you won't work across silos. This is why it can be done, but it's difficult. You can transform a department within the department, assuming that the customer's pain fits with inside your own remit. Usually innovation doesn't. Usually innovation comes from collaboration. Most mature industries, you kind of squeeze the juice out of the lemon of innovation. There's little more that you can do in most mature industries around just the silo of that industry. You have to go outside. What happens if I were to take a technology firm and a chemist firm? What happens if I were to take a telco and a bank? Well, what does the customer want? They want free mobile phones. What does the bank want? More customers. What's the business model? I mean, it's that kind of approach of looking externally to making that happen. Niall, how do you get the resources, finance, human, to execute the business digitalization? We are at stage 3, competitive advantage, but we find it very hard to get the resources to complete any of the business development. Any advice? Yes, it's an interesting one, because technology adoption and new innovations. And who heard of Zoom? Who was using Zoom 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago? I mean, its growth has been exponential. When things take off, they take off exponentially. And the problem I suspect, Christina, that you're talking about here, the problem that I suspect is that when you're turning over 1 million and this thing's making 1,000, it's not even worthy of the gap in what it means to your balance sheet is so little, it's not worthy of the attention. But what happens with every product, it goes through a life cycle of growth and then changing and ducking, and you need a new one to grow. So it is really important to have the next wave coming, but its adoption is usually slower than you think. But when it's accepted, its acceleration is faster than you could ever have imagined. And the leaders need to understand business life cycles, technology adoption life cycles. They need deliberate training, practice, and understanding of this stuff. And usually they have been promoted for being good at the skills. A baker gets promoted because he's the best baker, not necessarily the best leader. You know, it's that kind of idea. They need to stop and go, in the digital world, things have changed. I need to get a handle on this. I see my good friend Moaz is there from Sudan, or maybe he's in Saudi Arabia. Moaz, good to see you. Why the misunderstanding of digital transformation? Why is it happening? That's a good question. If you look at the 3 forces that are coming together, if you listened to publicists, they're coming from a creative background and they talk about the user and user experience, which is perfectly fine and right. So these creative agencies talk about the customer. You then get into the management consultancies and they talk about your business, your positioning, your internal operations. And then you talk to the tech business and they talk about platforms and data. So you have 3 different people talking about digital transformation in 3 very different ways. Customer, positioning, operations, and technology. The reality is that McKinsey bought over 40 creative agencies. We're seeing Infosys and Cognizant building out their management consultancy practices. They're all starting to merge. But the resources that I have to sell today, you're going to find out about it. That's why there's confusion. Most people then hear the technology, and actually technology is the visible layer. It's the outcome. It's the part where you plug it in and you see it and there it's going. But most CRM systems have failed to make any difference in the past, not because the technology was poor, but because of culture and adoption, the leadership's ability to make an agile organization. David Rowe, with COVID-19, how to reinforce leveraging this paradigm shift, new approach to working after lockdown is beginning to relax. David, the leaders, managers, and decision makers need to, and I think they are, everybody, the world is at a point right now where they don't want to go back. I think this is going to have profound impact on the price of commercial real estate in Dublin. I think it's going to have a profound impact on infrastructure for public transport. And I mean, these are going to be the visible signs. This is now an acceptable form in how you do work. It's acceptable how customers will do the research, how they'll make their selection, and how they'll do the procurement. In America, in the US, 52% of all groceries were bought online, and 50% of those people hadn't purchased anything online 4 weeks ago. When you start seeing that technology acceptance and adoption, B2B, B2C, government, charitable sectors, this is really pushed behavioral change from the customer. It has to push behavioral change inside the organization. Leaders can resist it. Leaders can do the blind monkey stuff, but the society is changing. When a YouGov poll, which I pronounced at the very start, in Britain says only 9% of people want to go back to the old way of working. You've got to change. It's how do you do it? And this transformational process is the way to do it. So we have one more. In my experience, this is Nisa. Nisa, in my experience, communication from business leaders down through the organization, or lack thereof, and resistance to change is the biggest barrier to transformation. Would you agree? And if so, would you suggest to help leaders remove that obstacle? I do agree, but I think it's a symptom of a bigger problem. The symptom, Nisa, is that the strategy was never likely a strategy. It was an operational plan. It wasn't talking about what we're going to do less of and what we're going to do more of. It didn't include in it our as-is state and our to-be state. It didn't inspire people to want to change. The clarity, what happens is digital transformation is 90% politics and communication and strategy and 10% about the technology. Everybody in the boardroom goes, yes, I'm up for change. Yes, I'm up for change. But how you are defined as a human when you go home at night is about the number of direct reports you have. How you are defined from a perspective of being important in an organization is based on your job title. So when that's challenged, your natural tendency is to withdraw, unless the to-be state is more beneficial than the as-is. And it gets worse when you move into AI enablement, because one of the key things that AI does that ordinary systems do not is it removes the need for business experts. You take the radiographer in the hospital can now be replaced by AI. The general practitioner you go to see about your cold and your rash and your cough, they can be replaced by better systems and more accurate systems than them. Now, we have to accept it. Try and explain that to them. Time to move. The accountant, the cab driver with autonomous vehicles. I mean, we're only at accountancy, banking, and cab driving. We haven't gone past the letter C. Resistance to those changes means that you will be left behind, and those who accept the changes and accelerate with it are the ones that will succeed. Digital innovators are winning. It's the name of Tuesday, the 12th of May, how digital innovators win. I've overrun by 1 minute and 30 seconds. I see Dave Feening is on here. Dave, you had posted something there. Anybody interested in innovation, check out our ICT Skillnet Innovation Excellence Program on the website. I want to finish by thanking Dave and Aideen and the crew at ICT Skillnet. I hope to see you all next week. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for asking me to be the speaker. Gang, it is a pleasure as always working with you, so professional from start to finish. Hopefully I will see you all next week where we will go how to win in the digital economy. Thanks. Talk to you again soon.